joining us for another edition of CATA's Tech Now Television. This is our series focusing on the development of a national public safety broadband network. And I'm very pleased to have joining us to kick off this inaugural session, Senator Vernon White. The Senator is a part of CATA's Public Safety Advisory Board, has been an instrumental advisor for us as we've been moving this file forward. And of course, I couldn't think of a better guest to have join us in this kickoff session. Senator, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us today.
No, thanks for inviting me.
For those who don't know you very well, and I can't imagine there are many that are in that boat, but you've had quite a rich history in policing before you got into politics. Would you mind filling our viewers in with a little bit of a bio on yourself and your experience leading up to now?
Sure. I grew up in the East Coast, Cape Breton Island, joined the RCMP, graduating in 1982. I served with the RCMP for just under 25 years, primarily in the Arctic, 19 years, but as well here in Ottawa. And the last job I had was Assistant Commissioner in charge of Information Identification Services. And most people in this world would know it as real-time identification system is what came out of there. Most recently completed. In 2005, I left the RCMP and became the police chief at Durham Regional Police Service. And in 2007, I was made the chief of police for the Ottawa Police Service, where I served until 2012. 2012, I was appointed to the Senate by Prime Minister, ultimately the Governor General, on recommendation by the Prime Minister.
So when you start talking about this entity that's the Public Safety Broadband Network, you know, in a very brief nutshell, for those who may not be familiar with the idea, is it's a concept to create a truly national, coast to coast to coast, and across the border interoperable communications solutions for Canada's public safety community. Obviously, policing and their use of this network are one of the key organizations or key users of this network ultimately. Could you paint for us a picture, based on as a police chief and a police officer, how would have having this network in play when you were active have been of assistance and advantage to you?
Well, you know, I think, I mean, you can look at the small letter P for policing, the guy in the street or the gal on the street, and how they would actually be able to interact and interplay within their own organization, across organizations, across the 198 police agencies in this country, and in fact, outside of this network, as a result of it being implemented. Would we have had it? I think it would have allowed us more real time to actually manage and deal with issues. And I think overall, if you look at the size of this country, something like this network is going to be absolutely crucial to continuing to provide a robust police presence across the country. And I remember working in the north as long as I did, and in Iqaluit, and even today, if you drove a couple of kilometers outside the community, you would have no access other than setting up a single sideband radio on the side of the tundra with a bunch of wires hanging off it. Otherwise, you'd have no access. And yet I can go to, as I did last summer, I was in Lapland, Finland, talking on my cell phone to an individual in Vancouver, BC, while I was standing in a boat fishing, actually, and answering a question to a reporter. So it's not that the technology isn't out there. Right now, for us, it is about having that framework to allow us to plug the technology into the framework. And from my perspective, I see that network as being crucial to actually delivering on that. The second part, I guess, as a police leader, we do want to be at the leading edge, not the bleeding edge of technology. And I think to be at that leading edge, we need to actually have, again, that same framework and foundation to build on. And until that's in place, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to get to the places we need to get to, even as we're rolling out expensive and expansive radio systems that will have large pipes and large capacity and large capability. Really won't be fully utilized until we have such a framework. So
with your police chief cap still on, Vern, what specific opportunities and challenges do you see facing policing and the public safety community more broadly in the rollout of this public safety broadband network?
Well, you know, I think one of the challenges we have right now will be money. I mean, I don't believe that this is a technological challenge for us. I believe it has to have a technological solution, and that's a difference. I think right now it is about trying to figure out how do we roll out this system with partners, and I mean partners with money, with partners that actually see the same value or an equivalent value from the megahertz space that we see. So I think it's finding those partnerships that actually have the ability to utilize part of what we're not going to use initially, or at least not use continuously, that's going to allow us to deliver on this. If we go to police chiefs across the country and tell them, look, we need you to pony up cash, this will not happen. I don't see, even the Calgarys of the world today are under financial duress. And if you look at the other police agencies, they're struggling right now to maintain the same level of service they have based on some of the increased costs they're getting. The radio system, I think, drained any technological capacity they had. I think was drained by the radio systems that were rolled out. And some services were $40 to $80 million costs. I think that's going to be a challenge. So we need to find those partners. And I think then we need to introduce those partners to the federal government and say, look, we have some other players. We believe there's a good way or an appropriate way for us to leverage what they have, understanding what we have, which is the megahertz space, so that both of us will get what we need at the end of the day, and ultimately policing and emergency services will have what they need to improve the level of service they're delivering on now.
So then, as a senator on the Hill, involved, I'm sure, knee-deep in policy discussions and other items possibly related to this network, what words of advice would you have for those who are, helping advance this network forward? Using, of course, the recent great news in the federal budget regarding the provision of the other 10 megahertz, as well as some initial funding for the network. It sounds like some of the right ingredients, the right support is in place to really start moving this forward. But as we continue to do so, what kind of guidance would you offer, again, those who are really trying to help promote this campaign?
Speaking not from my role as a senator, but speaking from my role as a former police officer and someone who cares deeply about our future when it comes to being able to provide an enhanced service every day. I do think, again, it's back to finding some of those valuable assets who are able to assist in the costing of, and if not the funding of, portions of this broadband network. The example I have often used in the city of Ottawa, 364 days a year, there's a shared network for the radio systems in the city. The shared network includes things like OC Transpo, who have access to it. On Canada Day, when the Ottawa Police Service, every single employee is rolled out, OC Transpo actually loses a portion of their utilization. They know that, and they go to a backup system that they have. I think we have to find, and I'm not suggesting that is the answer, but I think we have to be open-minded enough to realize, to have an expectation, and now I'll put my senator hat on, an expectation of the federal government to come up with $500 million or more to roll this out on their own is going to be difficult to do. Today's financial crunch, we just finally have introduced a budget of a surplus after the Conservative government's been in power for almost a decade. I think it's very difficult to expect them to go into a deficit on the back of this unless there's a real plan and a real strategy around bringing other people to the table that have real assets.
As you may be aware, we interviewed Eric Trunsky of CITIG last week. He echoed a number of your sentiments. It's not really the technology. Funding will be an issue, in the hope that public-private partnerships will be a key consideration. He also talked a little bit about the governance challenges and having some set plan now in place for governing and managing the network and the spectrum. Do you have any final words of advice for us as we move forward in trying to ratify the issues around governance? Again, perhaps from your perspective of a police officer, given that a lot of the challenges isn't just in a national strategy, but also when we get to boots on the ground and command and control. Any final thoughts you might want to share on those issues?
Well, if you look at the governance of the .ca, the .org, the .coms of the world, so the internet, you look at the governance structure they have, it works very well for them. And I'm going to say, in fact, that it might be one of the better governance structures that I've seen cross countries, cross continents, sharing systems when it comes to managing issues. Now, I would love to be able to say that's exactly the governance structure we need. The challenge we have is then security, because the only thing worse than no broadband network is one that is not secure, one that we can't have confidence in, can protect our assets, which is our information. So I think thinking about that governance structure that the internet world has put in place for managing the internet, and it's quite interesting. If you haven't met with the folks from .ca, you should. They're here in Ottawa, because it's quite interesting in the sharing of knowledge, the sharing of assets that they've actually put in place. I think if you took that structure and then overlaid it with a level of security that satisfied both privacy concerns, security concerns from agency perspective and police service perspective, and other agencies outside of policing perspective, I think you could actually build a structure. Now, what that looked like and who decided, who managed that structure, I think we have to be very open-minded about. The Government of Canada might say, we would like this to be an independent CATA-like group that does this. But they also might say no, that we are concerned that enough about the security piece that we can't allow quote-unquote private industry to be the only sole player in this space. I think we have to be open-minded enough to understand the perspective of both. But I do think there is a structure that can be built quickly, and I think that's where you and your group and all of us, I think, can provide that advice around, we don't want to own this by ourselves, we just want to see this out there. And I think emphasizing the importance of the end game rather than the importance of us getting what we want. This is not about what we want. It's about what is needed in this country for safety and security. And I mean, in the last 4 or 5 years, safety, security, economy are 3 of the top issues. In the last 6 months, safety and security have, in my mind, become the top issues. I think timing is perfect. I think it helps the fact that in the Budget Implementation Act, we have seen the next 10 megahertz, which I know is a concern of everyone out there who will watch this. We have seen it arrive. I think now it's in some seed funding. I think now it's having a plan of attack and some discussions about what that looks like going forward. And I think we do need that kind of blue sky discussion without any ownership and without any protectionism to come up with that solution.
Senator, those are excellent guiding thoughts as we move forward. I greatly appreciate the time you spent with us today sharing your views. I certainly hope that we'll be able to invite you back again as we continue to move the file forward, and as we certainly look forward to addressing a lot of what you've talked about today, the governance, the need for collaboration among entities, the impact to the economy, and safety and security of the network. Obviously, a lot of work to do. Certainly going to be leveraging you as much as we can on the Public Safety Advisory Board as we continue forward, and definitely would like to have you back as a guest on the show again. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to having you back again in the very near future.
And you know what, you identified that there's some real challenges, but at least now I think we actually have a path we can follow. I think up until the announcement of this 10 megahertz, it was very difficult for us to plan for the future when we had no idea if there was a future. I think now we understand there's a future, and now we just have to walk it through. You know, it took hundreds of years to build the Great Wall of China. I truly believe that in a couple of years we could build a path or a road across this country, as you would say, coast to coast to coast, that will improve safety and security of Canadians. So for me, I'm excited about this opportunity and these challenges. And thanks again for inviting me.